Okay, so for this video, we're going to go through the same thing that we did in our VC presentation, but for those people that missed it. Okay, so when we looked at the elements of the box and whisker graphs that we're going to compare, again, this is very close to the multivariate investigation. Very little extra. Again, you need to compare both groups. That's the key thing. You can't just make comments about one group and ignore the rest. You have to always be making comparisons. So even something like this, where it's saying that one is fairly symmetrical with no skews, this is different then. So again, I'm tying in each time for each one. Same for here. The spread of the teenagers. Again, we talk about the range, and then we compare it to the range of the others. We just don't say, this range is this, the other group's range is this. We're always trying to make those little comparisons and tying them in together. When it comes to making the call of whether one group tends to be larger than the other, the main things that we're looking at are center, shift, and overlap. The other parts give us good information that we look at and we develop, but when we make that call at the end of that section of your investigation, it's going to be based on those three. Okay? And again, at this point, we're not making a call on the median. Okay, itself, whether the median of those groups actually are larger. We're just looking at the two sample groups to say whether they overall tend to be bigger or smaller, or the same. Okay, again, for achieve, we're looking at straightforward what you see and the values. Merit, we got to relate it to context. What does it mean in the context? So again, instead of talking just about groups and numbers and dots, we're actually make sure that we're, in our example, we're talking about males and females, so we're actually talking about males and females. And if it's running speed, then we're comparing running speed. Okay? And excellence, again, is always the why. Why does this either make sense or not? And of course, anytime when you make a comment about a why, it's best if you can add a bit of research. Again, not much, but just a bit of research to tie it all in together. Okay? So when we looked at symmetry, shape was the first category. We're looking at symmetry. We're looking if it's balanced or if it's symmetrical. If there's a skew, again, we comparing one side to the other. For example, this is a right skew because this whisker is longer than that whisker. And then we're looking at the mode, kind of how many kind of humps do you see or major values. Okay, those are the technical terms. One mode, bimodal two, multimodal more than two, or if we don't see a clear mode. Okay. Looking at this data for our practice, again, this is exercise by gender. This time was in minutes. We have our graph. We have our stats summary. Okay. Starting with symmetry, I said that both groups are asymmetrical. And then I went into detail. Now, if they were symmetrical, then I would do my main detail here because there'd be no skew part. Okay, the females have a right skew. The males have an even larger right skew. So again, that comparison. A skew is expected on the left because on the left side, no one can go less than 0. So now I'm trying to get statistical reasons why I expect it to be skewed, why it makes sense. Here, everybody stopped at a hard 0. You can't get into negative exercise. So it's never going to stretch really far to the left. Okay. However, some people train more. They're serious athletes. And again, if they're really serious, they're going to really stretch it out. Okay. To that side. So I would expect a right skew. Neither group have a strong mode. You could say that these two are modes, but it's just 3 versus 2. That's not very strong. Okay. And again, if we try to explain why this is the case, because you would expect a normal distribution, on average, people exercise between a certain amount. But in this case, I don't see it. So this would tell me that I probably don't have enough in my sample. And when we do our actual investigation, you'll definitely have at least 50. So we should be safe on this regard. Okay. Looking at the center. In our case, center, generally we can just compare the medians of the group. You could compare the means as well, but medians is good enough. So again, for achieved, at this part, we're looking at it 30 minutes for the male group, and for the median for the females was 30. This is your achieved kind of part. And maybe we'll color that. We'll color that in yellow. Okay. So that's your achieved part. And you can move on if you were just going for that. For our merit people, again, we want to go more depth of what this means. Okay, I just chose to use the line about how it supports my hypothesis. You know, so again, this supports my hypothesis. So I'm kind of talking a little bit more. And again, I've brought in the ideas of exercise and males and females. Oh, small typo. Okay, then males. So in this case, I'm sort of going more towards my merit for this. And then finally, when I start to give some reasons why this is the case, I'm saying that maybe women might take more care of their physical appearance than men. I don't know if this is really true, but just try to think of a reason why. Definitely, I try to find some kind of research to back that up if I'm going to go there. Okay, so you're achieved, your merit, and your excellence. Spread. Again, for spread, we're going to talk about two things. We're going to be talking about the range and the interquartile range, or your middle 50% box. Looking at that, again, I've given the values, and that's important, especially at level 2. We don't just say what it is, but we actually say that it's in minutes. Okay, again, I've compared it. This is almost the same as males who have the same range of a 120, right? So there's my achieved. That's my achieved part. Okay, and then again, going into some reason why. So my merit kind of excellence kind of idea. Okay, it's to be expected, as both would have probably people who do exercise and do no exercise. There's nothing that we would expect it. On average, when we're looking at average and the median, that might be different. But when we're just looking at maximums and minimums, yeah, it makes sense that they were close to the same. Okay. Actually, I would go for excellence because, again, this is more the why. Why this is the way it is. Okay. Now, for the IQR, the middle 50%, here we're talking about consistency. Okay, same as in the last one. The smaller the box, the more consistent the data. This is your main core, your middle 50%. So that value, which is represented by our IQR, the 75% number minus your 25%, that's your UQ and your LQ. Okay, I'm comparing those two. Again, I put in all of the numbers for it. All right, I put in what the value is and what the range was, where it went from, right? My LQ to my UQ. Compared to the males. Okay, now again, at this point, from here to here, saying what it is, that's our achieved. Talking about what it means, that would be our merit. This would be our merit here. Okay, because one IQR is smaller, that indicates that the males have more consistent times. And then when I start to go into the reasons why they might have more consistent times, okay, that's when I get into my my excellence, sorry. Okay. Going on to unusual. Now, generally, we're just talking about outliers and clusters here. You'd like to be able to point out what they are and what those values are, instead of just saying there is an outlier kind of thing. If there was one, I would point it out. In this case, I don't think this person is so far from the other person, so I'm going to count them as no outliers. Again, I talk about each group. Neither group has outliers. I'll make this one. So here, again, just making the comment, we're looking at our achieved. Same thing for clusters. I didn't really see any clusters. That kind of a comment, again, is your achieved. If I'm going into why this is the case and what this probably means, now I'm talking about my merit excellence kind of category. Again, I'm interpreting different things about them. Here I said for the why there was no clusters. Well, if there was a cluster, one way it could have happened is if you had something